Okay, so this is effectively our sort of keynote talk in that we've been advertising in the Times, Sunday Times, with the slogan "Let's Talk Fees" as a kind of theme for this year's show for fairly obvious reasons, and that's what we're going to do. So I've got a really, what we're going to be talking about is we're not going to be talking about the politics of it because it's happened. We know that it's happening. We all have different views about it, or we may not have different views about it, but that's not the topic. The topic today is this is what's happening. We need to talk about what that means and how people cope. And so we've got some very, very interesting panellists to tackle this question of the cost of private education and the implementation of VAT. I've got Gavin Horgan here, who's head of Millfield, which is one of the more expensive schools in the show, and we'll talk a bit about what that means and what it means for them. Then David Woodgate, who's chief executive of the independent school Bursars Association. Bursars are the people who will be sending you your fee notes, so they know an awful lot about what this change is going to mean for the sector as a whole. Then Henry Vaughan from Selina Finance, who has some very interesting thoughts about different ways you might manage to pay the fees. And then Marius, Carney, who's from Glenstal Abbey School in Ireland, where you don't charge VAT, do you? So what does that mean, and why can Ireland deliver something also with quite a radically different cost base as well? So we're going to dig into alternatives. I mean, in a way, what Marius is standing in for is schools outside London, where the cost base is very different, and there are other options, other ways of saving money. So we're going to start with Gavin. Millfield's always been one of the most expensive schools. Why is that? I mean, presumably high fees help you keep at the front globally. Is it something like that, or?
I think it's really helpful for people to understand that the majority of schools represented here are not-for-profit organisations. So the fees that we take in are entirely spent on providing the service that we provide. And typically, as with many things in life, you do get what you pay for. We are at the forefront, particularly in terms of sport globally, but also in terms of other provision, and that simply costs more. Millfield's always operated a Robin Hood model as well, so we spend about £6 to £7 million of gross fee income on bursaries every year to widen access. So those are the reasons that our fees are where they are.
Just in case people don't know anything about Millfield, which is quite possible, do you want to do your Olympic athletes brag? Because that's a really good one to explain how good at sport you are at Millfield.
If we were a country at the recent Olympics, we would have come ahead of Kenya in the medals table. We would have come 18th in the medals table. We've had our alumni getting medals at the Olympics since the 1950s.
So it's a very, very sporty school, amongst many other qualities that it has, and that's part of the cost, as you were explaining. So private schools are managing VAT change in different ways. Some are absorbing part of the cost, others plan to reduce the extra cost gradually over several years. What's Millfield doing and why?
We have spoken to parents about it for years. As soon as we assumed the policy was going to be brought in, we started to speak about it. We managed expectations, and we've added 15%, which is a huge hit to parents. But there was no way that we could deliver what we do without doing that.
And so 15 in one go, starting in January? Starting in January,
yes.
Yeah. And we had a conversation a year ago at an awards ceremony about the other side of this and what you were doing for bursary students. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think it was a very interesting...
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the start, Millfield operates this Robin Hood model of using gross fee income to pay for bursary students, and it has done since 1935. Many parents pay for more than one child. They pay for their own child and they pay for another child, and that's a wonderful part of the model. We're looking to expand our bursary provision. We don't have a huge foundation. We're in the process of raising what we target 100 million over the course of the next 5 years in order to expand our bursary provision. So our vision is that we can actually expand access through this time to Millfield. One caveat I'd like to make is I suspect we will see that more of our discounts will be given to children based on merit over time rather than simply financial means.
Okay, so bursaries might become more like scholarships used to be.
Yes.
That's very helpful indeed, Gavin. We'll come back to you in a minute. We're going to move on to David now. So how do Millfield's actions on VAT, which just to remind you, if you've kind of lost the detail, 15% on after Christmas, how does that compare with the sector as a whole?
It's not far off the median position. We're finding many schools are looking at 13 to 17% as the kind of level of VAT which they are having to pass on to parents. Some schools are in the position where they're putting the full 20% on. Others are absorbing the VAT at least for the rest of this academic year. In other words, they're dipping into their reserves, into their cash to cushion that position for parents, but they're not going to be able to do that as a long-term strategy. So we're seeing a range.
Yeah, I'm a data man, David. So if we're drawing the curve, is it like, I mean, is it quite kind of, is it a bell curve? And
It's a bell curve,
yep.
I think, yeah.
Yep, with
a slight skew towards around the 15%.
Okay, great. And has anyone gone above 20? Has anyone thought inflation plus VAT?
One or two might have done that, but they're in a very rarefied position, shall we say. But the typical independent school, if such a things exist, are taking the same kind of approach that Gavin has talked about. They're looking at their cost bases. They're saying, you know, what can we cut? Where can we cut? How can we be more financially future-proofed, if you like? But there is a cost base. You do get what you pay for in an independent school. But equally, those schools will look to provide bursary funding to enable us to still reach a wide range of different pupils.
Okay, so let's get on to the kind of question that's probably relevant for most parents here. Well, first of all, I'm going to ask the audience, who lives inside the M25? Yeah. Okay, so why are school fees in London, meaning inside the M25, so much higher than the rest of the UK?
I'm a governor of a school within the M25, so it's a very interesting question. That I think, obviously, one of the things you buy in an independent school is the quality of the teacher. Teachers are not cheap. Employment costs in London are high. You get what you pay for. Premises costs, all of the costs of running a school, as you will know as people living in London, it is not at the same level as the rest of the country. So we have to pitch the fees at the right level in order to provide the kind of facilities, the kind of teaching, the kind of support that your parents, you as parents, expect from your schools.
Yeah, but just to be devil's advocate with that one, I mean, state schools in London have the same issues, and they employ teachers in London and blah blah blah, and they manage to deliver it at much lower cost. So what is it? Why? What is it about private? Is it to do with the fact that they've had a very competitive market for a long time that they've been able to sit on?
It's competitive, it's added value, and it's building up funds to provide the kind of bursaries, transformational bursaries indeed, that Gavin has talked about. You've got to be able to put some money into your reserves to help fund the education of those children to come in future generations.
Do you agree with the OBR that numbers of students in the sector are going to fall?
In the short term, yes. I think the OBR has said 35,000 in their assumptions underpinning the budget. There are other surveys out there with a range of figures. I know the Treasury have said 90,000. And I think in the short term, you mentioned a bell curve, we'll see a J curve. There will be a decline in numbers in the short term, but it will pick up again because of the quality of the product that we're offering, because of the choice it offers to parents, because it will support your children's education into the future.
So, I know this is a really unfair question, but it has to be asked, I think. Obviously, you know, if that many children leave the sector, it won't fall equally on all schools. It'll be some schools that suffer disproportionately, and it's likely, therefore, that some schools will go under, isn't it? I mean, that's what everyone's predicting. If you agree with that, as a prospective parent, how do you work out whether a school's going to go under or not? Because that's obviously without wanting to cause a run on the pound, that is a scary thing. You don't want to put your child into a school that is no longer functioning 6 months later.
There are options that fall short of going under, I think, First Guy, and we are seeing schools coming together. We're seeing mergers.
Yep. Hold it tight.
Getting that now. You're getting that now. There are options that fall short of going under. Schools are merging, they're growing, they're coming together to make a stronger school by bringing two together. So there are options that fall short of closure. But yes, you need to be looking, you need to do your financial due diligence, if I can put it in that way. Look at the accounts for a school you're considering. They are available on Companies House and indeed the Charity Commission if it's a charitable school. Don't just turn up and say, yeah, we love the way this school looks. Do some hard digging into the numbers. Challenge when you speak to the admissions people, you know, where is your financial position? How have you saved money in order to make the school as affordable it can be in a very difficult market and environment?
I think this is absolutely brilliant advice, and probably a school show first. I mean, we've often heard talk about go to Ofsted to look at school inspections, or go to the independent school inspectorate to look at independent school inspections. Get Companies House, Charities Commission, get a financial picture. I mean, not everyone's good at looking at financial data, but find a friend who is, I guess, would be the advice there. So
shop around if necessary.
And there are plenty of people who could give advice on those kind of questions as well if you're unsure about what you're looking at, and including probably Henry. So Henry is here because obviously we've heard a lot from Gavin and a little bit from David about bursaries as one way that schools cope with affordability, but a lot of people won't get bursaries, and it's quite challenging to apply for a bursary. There are many talks about that tomorrow on the stage at the other side of the room, all day long actually, about that. But most parents are having to pay the fees, and so Henry, tell us about your product and why parents use it.
Well, I think what's important to start with is to say that more and more parents aren't eligible for bursaries because of the value of their home, and I think that's particularly relevant within the M25. The value of property in London has shot up so much that people are finding themselves ineligible for bursaries and scholarships simply because of the value of their home. And so our product fits within the mortgage market. It sits on top of any existing mortgage and is essentially a very flexible facility that parents can draw down when they need to pay for school fees. It differs from a traditional remortgage in that you don't pay interest on it unless you use the facility, so it acts essentially like a very large overdraft. And parents use it, we find, a lot at the moment to cover the extra cost of education, but also as a bit of a hedge. They don't know how much their school's fees are going to rise, and they want to make sure they've got a facility available that can cover the cost no matter how much they rise, because it's not just the 20%, it's 20% plus whatever the schools have to additionally charge, maybe because of the new employer's insurance or any other costs that may or may not be going up. It's unlikely to just be the 20% VAT over the lifetime of a child's education.
Yeah, I mean, on that front, you know, we're hearing of 15% this year. It was 8% the year before. You know, school fees have been on an upward ratchet for as long as I can remember. In fact, really oddly, I found my sister's school fees from 1984 in my father's desk. He died recently, and 1984 she went to a convent school where the school fees for a term were £300, and that equates to £2,000 after when you adjust for inflation for a term, and that was because a lot of independent schools in those days, I mean, this was a convent, they employed nuns and married women who they didn't pay in the holidays, and so they had very low costs. And a lot of independent schools were very, very low cost a long time ago. It's not the case anymore. They've ratcheted up. So for parents who are having to deal with basically, if you're at the start of this journey, I mean, you're hedging against potentially massive above inflation rises ad infinitum. What can you do?
Well, it's a funny thing in that every other large expenditure in our lives, be that house purchases, car purchases, or anything else, we finance. You finance your car. Most people nowadays finance their car purchase. Nearly everyone has a mortgage on their property. for some reason, we've not got comfortable with the fact that you might want to finance your school fees. And this is a facility that we are offering because we think that it is a sensible option for many parents. It's not going to be the perfect option for all parents, and some will have different access to different facilities that might be better for them. But we want to be able to offer those parents who want to give their child the best education possible, the facility to draw down on that equity that they've worked so hard to save for, to pay off their mortgage. They've got all of this equity and the wealth tied up in their home. We want to give them the option to be able to use that to pay for their child's education.
And are you finding that VAT is having an effect, or the prospect of VAT is having an effect on demand for your product?
I'll probably answer that by saying the moment the general election was announced, so before we even knew the result, we had a 400% uplift in applications that week.
Wow. Okay, that's told us what we need to hear, I think. So, Marius, let's turn to Irish schools. But by proxy, really, we're talking about outside the M25, I think, because it's a pretty general picture. Why is it that schools in Ireland, first of all, do schools in Ireland have to charge VAT? No, they don't, do they?
Okay, so we're an hour's plane ride from Heathrow, but we are in another jurisdiction, and there is no VAT on school fees in Ireland, and more to the point, the government actually funds boarding schools in Ireland. So 1 in 2 of my teachers are paid for by the state. That makes a massive difference. You know, the whole operation is completely different. And for anybody living in the UK or in Ireland or in Europe, there are no university fees in Ireland either. So you come to Ireland for your equivalent of A-levels, progress seamlessly to university, and then parents are not picking up the massive university tuition fees. Yes, of course, you have to live in Dublin. It's not cheap, but it's still quite a considerable saving. Wow,
that's incredibly interesting. So, in a way, is VAT and school fees a consequence of Brexit?
I'm not.
Yes.
Yes, that's an interesting one, isn't it?
Under the European Union, you cannot tax education.
Yeah.
So this is a Brexit benefit, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
That was tongue-in-cheek, by the way.
Do you think that VAT will lead more UK parents to come and look at schools like yours?
Well, I think parents need to look at the school that's the right one for their child. You know, that's stating the blindingly obvious. We're all governed by our finances and price points and whatever, but I would like to think there are some students who, we already have some, who come from London to us. They have a wonderful time. They're able to carry the travel, the independence. They love it. It's a whole new culture and place for them. It's very similar to England, but it's not England. So, you know, our English students already have a fantastic time. Clearly, I'd love to have a few more, but, you know, ultimately, I would never, and I'm sure it's the same in your school, we would never accept somebody for whom the match fit wasn't right. We're all interested in getting the right child at the right school, and that's why you're all here today.
I think the vision you're sharing with us of a culture where the government's paying teachers' salaries in an independent school seems miles away from where we're at now here. But weirdly, we're of a generation, well, many of us are, not Henry, where the state was funding private schools when we were at school, and we had direct grant or different products, and there was not this huge divide between the two systems. And I wonder whether, just as an opening gambit for the panel as a whole, whether we think that there are any ways that we can close that political gap again.
I'm happy to speak as a product of the assisted place scheme. Actually, I was granted an assisted place and it transformed my life. I would not have remained in education post-16 had it not been for that system, and I've done reasonably well from it. So I think everything goes in cycles and we're in a state of flux at the moment, but it's definitely not the end of the world. And fundamentally, schools across the country care about educating children across the country to the best of their abilities. And occasionally politicians get in the way and try and politicise and divide. But schools and educators are pretty good. And so I'm actually seeing greater interest locally in state independent partnerships than I was doing. I think people were giving sort of horror stories of this would lead to greater entrenchment and division. I'm not sensing convincing that at all. I don't believe that the government's commitment to recruit so many teachers will actually work, or that it will transform the woes that face many state schools. And state schools recognise that it is through partnerships locally with schools like mine, like others, that we will benefit the children of the future. So I don't paint such a gloomy picture of division.
Yeah, though that's an interesting version of not gloomy when when you're saying you don't think the state is going to improve all that much. So that's the not gloomy picture. I would that strikes me as fairly gloomy actually in a way. But the I suppose a sort of practical question, which one of you two probably could answer: how far away from London do you need to get before school fees drop? Because there's an interesting thing. One of the things we've been thinking with the school show this year is that there are quite a few schools here from outside London, and they have day places as well as boarding places, many of them, and their day fees are much lower. No one here could ask me what the cheapest school in the show was, because we all know which is the most expensive, but we don't actually kind of think that way usually. But do you have a sense of the bands, like how far you have to travel before the fees drop?
I don't think there's a direct correlation between distance from London and level of fees, to be honest. You could go to Edinburgh and find a school that's perhaps more expensive than one in London.
Of course, but there are factors in London that make the fees high, aren't there? I mean,
as I've already said, yes.
Yeah.
But I think there are more cost-effective schools further from London, and interestingly, they are saying to me at the moment they are getting parents coming to them from more expensive schools. I've spoken to schools down on the south coast where their parents are placing their children, and they're travelling down on the train from London to the south coast on a Monday morning and coming back on Friday afternoon. So they get the benefits of a London life, their peer group, their friends and everything at the weekend, but they're down in a lovely coastal school overlooking the sea at several £1,000s a year less. But you've got to shop around again and see what you're getting, and what you want from the school, I think, is the real driver.
Can I just add to that? I have 1,400 students in my secondary school. 3/4 of those are full boarders, but 1/4 are day students. And half of those are people that have moved from London to the southwest. They enjoy living in Frome. They're able to access day education at a much cheaper price for 5 years, and then they return to the capital, or probably they stay in the southwest after that.
With an astonishingly fast train from Castle Carey into
Yes.
There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to be said for that part of the west, for getting back into London quickly. Okay, I'm going to throw this out to the audience, because we've got about 10 minutes left for questions, and you've got a really fantastic panel who can answer or try to answer your questions about fees.
I was just wondering what the panel's views on state boarding. There's a few state boarding schools here that give a really good education at maybe a more affordable boarding option. What's their view?
I was chair of the Boarding Schools Association a couple of years ago, and that represents all boarding schools in the country. And you're absolutely right that there are boarding schools of all price points available to parents, and those state boarding schools provide a remarkable education, and there the state pays for the day place, if you like, and you pay the top up to cover the boarding fees and other extras. So it really is a viable opportunity, and parents should take them very, very seriously.
We are on tomorrow's Let's Talk Fees panel. We have a state boarding school. Take part. Yes.
Hello, I wanted to ask a question about bursaries, which you say are going to be becoming more like scholarships and awarded on merit. That leaves me with a concern for the vast majority of students who may not be the top of their field in any particular thing. And how does one provide a place for them who will develop perhaps at a later stage?
Just to be clear, that was a personal view, and it's a bit of futurology on my part. Bursaries are an important part of what we do, because we want to have as varied an educational landscape as possible. And they link to our charitable status to a certain extent. However, with the application of VAT on fees, there is precious little benefit to our charitable status. There's corporation tax relief and the benefit of gift aid, but that's not that much really. So as that happens, independent schools will necessarily look to spend their money as beneficially and wisely to them as possible. And the positive impact to results, be they sporting results or academic results, of having a child who has a higher ability in a particular area will probably become more important. So I'm not saying, I'm giving my sort of personal view as to what the future might hold. Bursaries are still a very important part of the sector at the moment, and I'm sure they will continue to be so, but I'm just sort of signalling what might happen in the future.
And I think that's particularly true in schools that are not academically selective. They will still want to bring pupils in where they can unlock latent ability, and they will look at providing, up to 100% of bursaries. We still want to offer transformational bursaries in the sector and means-tested ones for parents who can afford something but not the full cost. So I think we won't be closing the doors on sources of future pupil recruitment.
And we have a talk tomorrow on schools that offer 100% free places and 100% and 10% bursaries
Yes.
as well. So there are plenty of... Do feel, if you're not sat down, do feel you're free to ask a question. You don't have to have a seat to take the mic.
Hi. So just in the news, I think last week or so, there's a court case going against the VAT and hoping for a judicial review of that. Just in your opinion, what's the likelihood of success?
Look, you don't take a court case forward if you are not hopeful of success. We don't know how it will go. It is for judicial review. It is seeking a declaration that the government's policies are incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights and the various human rights legislation in this country. If there is a declaration of incompatibility, the problem is the government doesn't have to do anything. They can ignore it. But we have got a government that claims to be a government that will respect human rights. It will be very interesting to see what they would do if that declaration of incompatibility comes about. What I must say, though, is litigation, whether from the Independent Schools Council or individuals, will not stop the implementation of VAT on the 1st of January. That will happen notwithstanding litigation. It is, though, going to be going through the courts. I wouldn't want to say too much more about things that will be sub judice.
Okay, I'm going to spin round this topic a bit then. You don't have to pay fees. I mean, there's a perfectly good free education system in the country. So why? What is the case for paying these higher fees?
Do you want me to pick up? It's a matter of choice, and parents are choosing something different for their children from what is on offer. I've been lucky enough to lead a range of schools in my career that are very, very different to each other. I currently run Millfield, which is Europe's biggest boarding school. Previously, I ran a much, much smaller school, which provided really much needed colour. And children there typically would not have coped within the state sector. It was a very relatively low fee school, and parents were scraping together the funds to make sure that their child could thrive. So that's one aspect of it, through to the school that I run at the moment, where typically children have a particular passion and they are desperate to pursue that passion alongside multiple other facets of education. And that's possible within my environment, which is not possible to do elsewhere. So it's a matter of choice.
I might echo some of that, and likewise I too have led other schools, and previously was the head of a large day school of 1,400 students. There's a very different quality, particularly to a boarding school. And boarding, I think, is something that people shouldn't walk past, because in a boarding school everyone's there 24/7. there are a range of opportunities. Simply the time that you don't lose in commuting is, is filled with so many other things. In our own school, we're a big house within which there's a school, and the commute time for the sixth form is a sort of 10-metre walk from their dorms to their classrooms. The result is that they are simply working, achieving, and enjoying from morning to night. And I can't begin to tell you how different that is. So it's well worth the money. Also, another thing is that we are a small school, and I know in bigger schools you can break down into smaller individual units or whatever, but in a small school you know people inside out and upside down, and the family feel of a small boarding school is completely different to anything else, I would say, and inevitably superior. If you can get your child into a boarding school, go for it.
And I think as parents, you want to do the best by your children. You're aspirational. You've got ambition for your children. You've got to weigh in the balance what is available. There could be a good state school there, but what does the local independent school offer? Not just the curriculum, maybe it has got more minority subjects, maybe it's got a much wider breadth of education, but all of the holistic stuff, the sport, the pastoral care, all of these kind of things. So you're looking at a whole package and comparing and contrasting and saying, is that worth me paying a premium to get what might be the best start in life for my son, for my daughter? And I think that's where we offer you something. In the same way some people want to buy a new BMW every 3 years. What's your priority in life?
Thank you very much. That's a very passionate defence. So what I'm just going to flag up now is that we're at Millfield.
We're down there, and you can come and practice your golf swing if you would like to. We've got a golf pro. You can have a drive.
And where are Selina finals?
We're just over in this corner towards the entrance, stand 133.
And where are you?
We are down that way.
Okay, so boarding that way, money that way. Thank you all very much. We are next. If you're feeling even the tiniest bit anxious about 11 plus and pre-test and all of that, we've got an amazing speaker who will guide you around that particular hurdle. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.